Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's time for our last spring positional preview, which can only mean two things. Number one, spring practice is almost here. Number two, we get to talk long snappers today. Is that right? Is this our long snapper show?
You know, it is not, and that's unfortunate. And respect to the long snappers. If you saw the Ohio State football team honored at halftime of the Michigan State game,
I did.
It was long snapper Bradley Robinson holding the Rose Bowl trophy, standing next to C.J. Stroud, a quarterback that plays for Ohio State. It was Bradley Robinson, the long snapper, 7th-year long snapper, who was holding the trophy. So respect to the long snappers, respect to the special teams.
I almost quote tweeted. I saw that tweet from the BTN account, and I almost quote tweeted it with, good to see this team respecting their elders or something like that. Bradley Robinson has a great sense of humor. When he announced his return for his final season, presumably final season, unless he can come up with another one somewhere. But for his 7th season, the text on Twitter, in addition to his notes app, whatever, was. Lots of people go to college for 7 years. Yeah, they're called doctors. Yeah, it was, anytime you can work Tommy Boy in for your announcement, you're coming back for one more season of college football, it was fantastic. I can't remember, did they let Bradley Robinson hold the trophy after he was part of the 97 Rose Bowl championship team as well? I can't remember.
Yes, Randy Ayers introduced the team on the court. Or Jim O'Brien. So
that was Randy Ayers last season. Yes.
Yeah. Bradley Robinson was originally a Michigan State Spartan, transferred to Ohio State. Had a brother, Andrew, who was the long snapper at Michigan. So that's an interesting side note of brothers on opposite sides of this battle of the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. And unfortunately, Andrew was already, I believe, graduated and gone from the team this year when Michigan got their win. So too bad for that portion of the Robinson family. So, Tom, there we go. Special teams preview, just like you wanted. Now, can we please move on to the lesser...
No Australian accents this time in the biggest upset of the season in the spring preview series.
Tom, let's talk about the secondary. No, Tom, don't say no yet, just yet. Who do you expect to see as your starting 5? Like when we watch the spring, and who are the first 5, the 2 corners and the 3 safeties? Tell us in your opinion, but also in your Australian accent.
No, I don't think we'll be doing that. We're not talking about punters. If we're not talking about punters, you don't get the accent. I'm very sorry. So corners, I feel like. And I think all of this is sort of, preface all of this with assuming these guys are all healthy, which I think is how you sort of are prefacing every conversation about spring ball. But assuming all of these guys are healthy, I think Denzel Burke and Cam Brown are kind of the free spaces in the bingo card at corner. Tanner McAllister, the transfer from Oklahoma State, I think probably walks in the door as the starter at that cover safety, slot corner, however you want to, whatever you want to call that position. Strong safety, I think you've got to figure that's Ronnie Hickman, right? I mean, that seems like that's got to be your answer. And then at the free safety spot, deep safety, however you want to call that, if Josh Proctor is healthy, and I don't know if Josh Proctor is healthy yet, that's kind of the open question right now. If Josh Proctor is healthy, I think that's Josh Proctor. If we fast forward to September 3rd and the first game of the season, I think that's going to be Josh Proctor's spot. If he's healthy, I think that's his spot. If not, it's probably Bryson Shaw to start the spring. But I think that's probably how that shakes out. Right now, if it was September 3rd right now and everyone is healthy, I think that's how they would probably be lining up.
Yeah, I'm exactly with you on that. And the other thing to remember about spring, this is also a time where guys get off-season surgery, like after the season, and they may be out for something completely unrelated, something you don't even know about. Saw, I think it was G. Scott posted a video to YouTube going around behind the scenes type of thing, and Jackson Smith and Jigba had a brace on his wrist, and everybody's like, what is this? What is that? What does this mean? And it's just, who knows, for one, but this is also the time of year where you get surgery in January after a rough season, a long season, and maybe by March you're still like, well, it's the orange jersey or the guys that we just watch walking around the fields because they're not ready to practice, but they have to keep doing something because you stay in shape by just walking for 2 hours while everybody else is practicing, or you're on the stationary bikes, or God forbid you have to go out into the sand traps there and just crawl around and do all of these maneuvers and stay in shape and work muscles that way. But yeah, I'm with you. If all things being equal, everybody being healthy, I think that's the 5. And then, there's also a pretty decent backup group. Like I think Bryson Shaw, obviously your free safety. This is a question I asked in the linebacker show. Where is Kourt Williams? Like, is he the backup to Ronnie Hickman? I'm not expecting Lathan Ransom to be anywhere near ready, so I'm just counting him out this spring after breaking his leg in the late last season. The cover safety, is that Andre Turrentine? Is it is Jansen Dunn back? We don't know yet. So there's some questions there. Corners, Legend Cavazos, J.K. Johnson, Jordan Hancock, where these guys are, ready to perhaps take that next step. But again, got to see who is healthy to see who ultimately brings that depth chart to fruition. The biggest questions kind of goes into that. Is Josh Proctor full go? For me, and we can spend some time on this. Where is Kourt Williams? And like I said, I asked this in the linebacker show. He's not a free safety. I don't think he's a cover safety because you have to be more. The ability to cover is more important than the ability to tackle and help in run support. If he's a strong safety, how many snaps are you going to give him that should be going to Ronnie Hickman? Unless, of course, he beats out Ronnie Hickman, but I don't think anybody expects that. Ronnie Hickman led the team in tackles last year, got injured in the second half of the year, and that's why his numbers kind of dipped. What does Ronnie Hickman, what kind of production can he have in Jim Knowles' defense as a healthy guy who just plays safety? So if they are set with Hickman and Proctor, and Kourt Williams isn't that slot guy, and all of the talk we've heard about Kourt Williams, he was actually productive when he played last year. They found spots for him. I'm interested to see where he is this spring. And then as you move into the season, how much do they put him in? Like, find spots for him, find, snaps here and there for him. And then if you have to do that, then shouldn't he be playing more? Now that's cart before the horse type thing. Where is he this spring, Tom? That's what I'll be looking to see. And then, how does he do there? And if there isn't a spot for him, do you move him? What do you do with him?
He's an interesting case because I think they're going to be looking to get him on the field probably somewhere. He's one of those guys you just consistently hear good things about behind the scenes. But you're putting, he's probably, like you said, he's not really a cover safety guy. That's, he is a stick your nose in there and make the tackle and run support kind of safety in a lot of ways. So that's not the cover safety. The cover safety really doesn't have much of a role in the run game. So he's a strong safety to me. But like you said, the leading tackler on the team is also a strong safety. So that makes it kind of hard to break into that starting lineup. I think it's going to be very interesting to see at what point, if he gets moved to linebacker or they try him at linebacker at some point this spring, at what point that happens, and then how long that experiment lasts. Because that will tell me one of two things. It will either tell me that they really, 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 really want to get him on the field, or they don't feel quite as good about the linebackers as you might think with the number of guys. I mean, this is the go back and listen to our last show. We talked about the linebackers in great detail, but there are like 10 scholarship linebackers on the team this spring. There are really only 2 spots. So if they move him down to linebacker, what does that mean? Does that mean that they really aren't thrilled with their choices there right now? Does that mean that they are just desperate to get him on the field, but they also don't want to take Ronnie Hickman off the field? Does that mean that Jim Knowles is, I feel like in all things, Jim Knowles is sort of trending towards smaller but quicker, guys in general, where guys who might have been safeties before maybe tend to be more like linebackers, and guys who might have been Sam linebackers now might be more like weak side defensive ends. And you're getting a little bit, you're focusing a little bit more on quickness and speed, speed in space, to steal a line from another assistant coach, from a Broyles award-winning assistant coach. Is that going to tell me that? And it feels like a lot of that is kind of contextual here. Like, when does this happen? How far into spring does this happen? When, how long does this last? Is this a one practice experiment, or is this something that they're going to really look at all season? I would think you're going to want to have him at that strong safety spot, because he's probably your second best option at strong safety right now, probably. We haven't seen a lot of these other guys yet. You mentioned Turrentine, you mentioned Jensen Dunn. I don't think those guys are strong safeties, probably. We haven't mentioned Cam Martinez yet, but he's not really a strong safety either. He's probably more of like that slot corner cover safety guy, yeah. Lathan Ransom could fit in a couple different spots in that safety rotation, but again, we're not going to see. He broke his leg on the kickoff return that went back for a touchdown in the Rose Bowl. So that wasn't even a like mid-November injury. That was a January 1st injury. I think, maybe we'll see him full go before fall camp, but we don't know that yet. He definitely won't be full go for spring. So there's a lot of possible moving parts there, but my assumption is you probably will try to keep him at strong safety. And if he really does move this spring, I think that's going to be notable for at least one of the reasons I mentioned before.
Yeah, I think he stays at safety as well. Interestingly, he was fifth among all defensive backs and tackles last year with 28. He was first in TFLs with 4. And Ronnie Hickman had 1, to give you an idea. And Ronnie Hickman obviously had many more snaps, but it was also playing more coverage than Kourt Williams. So it doesn't become one of these things where it's situational. And Kourt Williams is in there for certain kind of plays, certain kind of defenses, certain packages, and Ronnie Hickman is in there for others. Passing downs, it's Ronnie Hickman, that kind of thing. Obviously, that'll all be figured out. Another question that I have, which is always fun during spring, is who blossoms. This is where I think everybody's going to be watching Jalen Johnson, Jordan Hancock at corner, assuming they're both healthy. Is this where they take this step, this Jeff Okudah type of step as a redshirt freshman, to where they're good enough to play, good enough to start, but obviously the two guys ahead of them, they're maybe not to that level, but they'd be starting anywhere else and would be starting at Ohio State if the years weren't, say it was a couple years ago where they didn't have necessarily the talent that they do now, assuming Cam Brown is that talented. But, last year, could they have started? Maybe, maybe not. But just in a normal year, or in a down year, I should say, they would be starting. Can they get to that level? And maybe not yet in the spring, although as redshirt freshmen, they should be able to take off and hit the ground running, and by the end of spring be to the point where, we know what we've got, we can rely on them. I'm not saying they're going to turn this into a 3-man rotation. I have no idea how Tim Walton feels about that. But if they're good enough to play, you're going to find some you can rotate them a little, and maybe that's what they do. Maybe that's the Kourt Williams answer as well, as we go back to the safeties. But I'm interested to see Hancock and J.K. Johnson, but also let's not forget Legend Cavazos. Let's see these young guys take that step.
That was what I was just about to say. Was what I would really love to know is, end of spring, what order are those 3 guys in? J.K. Johnson, Jordan Hancock, Legend Cavazos, because Cavazos came in a year earlier. He was here for 2020. Those other guys came in 2021. J.K. Johnson was hurt last year. J.K. Johnson was one of those guys who you heard might be able to do some stuff as a freshman. Then he was hurt. He missed the whole last year. I think Hancock was banged up at a little bit at one point as well. So who is going to be that third guy if they do have a corner rotation? and Brown and Burke are both healthy, who is that third guy behind those guys? Because that, I think, could really be a battle this year. What's interesting is, you have the guys who, you really didn't, the hyped guys, Johnson and Hancock, who you didn't get to see last year. So, like, it's interesting to see them, like, finally get a chance to see them play this year. But also, you got a new corners coach, you got a new safeties coach, you got a new defensive coordinator. So you may be asking the corners to do things a little differently. There may be, that is a real opportunity where, okay, this is not like, okay, I've been here a couple of years, I know how to, I know what Kerry Combs is looking for out of his corners, I know what Matt Barnes is looking for out of his corners. Now they're looking maybe for some a little bit different stuff. They're going to be teaching you maybe some different technique. Who can pick that up more quickly? Like, that's a real opportunity for those younger guys to potentially get a little bit of a jump and maybe move up that pecking order quicker than they might have otherwise.
Yeah, and it's not just corners, safeties as well, and there's an opportunity to move up. Andre Turntine, like you said, and even the freshmen, Kai Stokes, Ryan Turner, Jair Brown. What do they do? Because those three are in for the spring. Do they? I'm not going to say do they make the Denzel Burke impact, but nobody was expecting Denzel Burke to do what he did, and that started right away. You started hearing about him right away. Do any of these three freshmen, you start hearing about them right away, where, like, you know what, this Jair Brown, or watch out for Kai Stokes, stuff like that, where you just start hearing stuff from people, and then it builds and builds and builds and builds, and then suddenly when he's starting on day one, you're like, whoa, that's surprising, but everything we had heard to this point kind of led to Denzel Burke starting, and so that it starts on day one. I'll be interested to see if there's anything like that.
The guy who on that list of the true freshmen, who I think, if the position group wasn't so jumbled and full of guys, I think Kai Stokes has the opportunity to be that type of guy this year. Not necessarily a start day one kind of guy, but he is very much like that Denzel Burke. Burke you heard about a lot once he showed up. Stokes is one of those guys the recruiting guys on our site, the folks who are on the program, like, they are very, very excited about Kai Stokes. He's someone who I think might make an earlier than expected impact. Again, not necessarily saying, I'm not expecting him to start day one against Notre Dame, but he could be someone who maybe has that, like, Lathan Ransom freshman year where, you're not necessarily starting day one, but by the time you get to the college football playoff, like, hey, there's that true freshman out there playing safety. Might have maybe that kind of trajectory. And again, a lot of this is going to depend on, there's a lot of veteran depth ahead of those guys in all three of those spots. Ronnie Hickman, we talked about Ronnie Hickman, Kourt Williams, talked about Josh Proctor, Bryson Shaw, Lathan Ransom, Tanner McAllister. Like, you've got a lot of veteran depth out there. Those are not going to be, positions where it's just like, oh yeah, just waltz right in and because there's no one there. It's going to be hard to break into that rotation, but he's someone who just kind of, put a pin in that one for now, but, keep an eye on him for sometime later this year.
You are predicting a Von Bell type of 2013 type of thing where kind of makes plays throughout the season and everybody's like, why don't you just start him? And then finally you start him against Clemson and he plays pretty darn well. Okay, Tom, that's quite a prediction. You're saying interception against Clemson in a bowl game in the postseason.
I don't know that there's a Pitt Brown on this year's team that would make that a real, a real correlation. I think the safety play might be better than that, but I think the talent is in there. I think that's a name you're going to hear, whether it's October this year or November this year or this time next year. We're talking about him as someone who, didn't start last year, but might be able to win a starting job in 2023. He's somewhere on that spectrum, I think.
The concerns that I have, I don't know. I think I have a talent level concern at safety for Ohio State. We still don't know what Josh Proctor can do. And this is a brand new defense. So even if he played well last year, it's still like, well, now he's playing in a new defense, so we don't know. Bryson Shaw was up and down, had some good moments, had some bad moments. Ronnie Hickman, is this a role that he can flourish in? Tanner McAllister is a coach on the field, but obviously needs to improve, or else he would have gone pro last year. Like, he wouldn't have come back for a fifth year if he was happy with his draft stock. So there's an issue there. Not an issue, but as we look for concerns, and really when you look for concerns on Ohio State's roster, you do end up having to nitpick because they do recruit very well. And what many teams would love to have Ohio State's concerns, if we can put it that way. But I think for me, as I'm looking at concerns in the secondary, I don't really have any at corner, although Cam Brown's health maybe is a concern. And behind him, everybody is improving, but I expect them to do well. I think for me, the talent level at safety, and Kourt Williams, you can throw him in there as well. Can he play in a coverage role? So I think there are concerns there for me. I don't think it's to the point where it's could it cost them a national championship? Maybe. I mean, I guess that's why it's a concern for me.
Yeah, I don't know if I would even use the word concerns yet. I think concerns is when you get halfway through spring ball and it's like, oh, this looks like this might be a problem. Yeah. Right now, this is, to me, is more of just kind of a question mark where you don't have like definitive answers. I feel like at corner, you have one definitive answer in Denzel Burke and another sort of conditional answer, which is Cam Brown is an answer, assuming he's healthy, but Cam Brown has not been able to stay consistently healthy throughout his career. So that's a sort of a conditional yes there. And then behind them, there's a bunch of talented guys. And I think any of the three returning guys could be in that rotation. If Cam Brown goes down, could potentially fill in for him pretty well this fall. The safety spots, I feel very good about Hickman. I think Hickman is going to do what they need to do. Tanner McAllister, I think, will be, at least good. I think he's going to come in, knowing the defense. And obviously Jim Knowles thinks he's someone who's going to be a positive impact on the team. Otherwise, he would not have said, would not have been okay with him transferring in. So it feels like those two spots are probably, at least, should at least be at least good, at least pretty, at least good enough to win the Big Ten, get to the college football playoff. Deep safety spot. Yeah, Josh Proctor. You heard encouraging things about Josh Proctor last year going into the season, and then game 2, he breaks his leg and he's done for the year. Bryson Shaw, like you said, ups and downs, was not perfect, was probably not as bad as people, the average Ohio State Twitter user thinks he is, but he wasn't great. I don't know that Bryson Shaw is a national championship deep safety, but maybe he will prove to be with another year of development and in this new system. That's a possibility. That put that on the I kind of want to see it this year list. Let's see what he looks like. And then, where does Lathan Ransom fit? I mean, you've got a bunch of kind of questions there. That deep safety spot, of the three, the deep safety spot is kind of the biggest question mark to me right now.
And even though I say it's a concern, I think it could also end up being a strength of the defense, because you do have Ronnie Hickman, as I said, led the team in tackles. Tanner McAllister going in for, I think this will be his 3rd year as a starter, maybe 4th year as a starter, knows the defense inside and out. And then Josh Proctor has been compared to Malik Hooker since the day he arrived. Maybe that eventually comes through, and we'll see that. But and then you look at Jansen Dunn's high school tape, and it's like, well, that guy's very talented. Kai Stokes, that guy's very talented. Like there are options there. I just, as I said, I'm nitpicking at this point. Another nitpick that Perry Eliano, new safeties coach corners. And so how does he mesh with the safeties, and how does new cornerbacks coach Tim Moulton mesh with the corners and safeties as the secondary coach? So there's some, again, it's not concern, but just something to watch in terms of new coaches, new techniques, new teaching, and how quickly do they pick it up. Jeff Hafley came in and they picked stuff up quickly in terms of looking back for the ball when, and they drilled it and they drilled it and drilled it. I guess another concern is how good are these coaches, Tom? Where Ryan Day has made some great hires and not so great hires, and which are these?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you look at the track records for both Eliano and Walton, and they both have encouraging signs for both of them. But Walton, everyone I'm sure at this point has seen the Jalen Ramsey quote about Tim Walton, and that's a pretty good, encouraging sign about what kind of a coach Tim Walton is. Okay, that's good. I think my concerns for Walton might be more on the recruiting side than the technique or, the teaching side maybe. But, again, teaching NFL players is different than teaching college players. You have a lot more time with some guys and you're teaching different stuff and it's more advanced. And, so there's some questions there. And then Eliano, the folks at Cincinnati were like crushed to lose Perry Eliano. And, some might suggest that Luke Fickell has some sense what he's doing in terms of coaching defense at the college level. So if Luke Fickell didn't want to lose him, well, that's probably a pretty good sign that Perry Eliano is a good coach. But as you said, he was coaching corners and now he's coaching safety. So there's a little bit of this is like the Cam Brown conversation earlier. Like, I feel like these are probably like, yes, this is a good hire. But if Cam Brown can stay healthy, but for they're questions. They're not questions that have been answered yet in terms of Walton working with college students for the first time since 2008, I think, and Eliano working with safeties instead of corners. It should all work, but there's a question. I mean, go back a couple of years and we're talking about bringing in Kerry Combs to run the defense, and it was like, well, he's been very successful in the past, but he hasn't had to do this. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and that's just these are a little bit of a crapshoot. If college coach hiring was, if there were any guarantees in college coach hiring, you wouldn't see so many people paying $20 million buyouts on head coaches and all that. Ask Auburn how much of a guarantee coach hiring is. It's just it is unless you're even some of the perfect fit hires where it's like, oh man, can you imagine Justin Fuente at Virginia Tech? What a perfect cultural fit. Nope, didn't work at all. So there are no guarantees, but I think there's reason for optimism with both Walton and Eliano and Justin Fry and Jim Knowles. I mean, Jim Knowles to me I think is the surest of the things of those four, but there's until you see it, there's always going to be at least some question, I guess.
And I'm glad there are questions, and I'm glad there are failures, because if there weren't, just think of the number of average coaches who would be like homeless at this point, rather than earning millions a year to not be coaching. I just
poor Bob Diaco, just wandering the streets aimlessly. How sad.
Help is on the way. No, Bob Diaco, it is not. So, Tom, as we do with these with these previews, we also want to take a quick look at what is going on at Michigan this spring and what they've got coming back and what they're looking like. So, they lose Daxton Hill, their do-it-all safety / nickel / best corner on the team, and they lose starting safety Brad Hawkins. That's also significant because he was a 3-year starter, I believe. They lose Vincent Gray at corner. So they've got they return DJ Turner and Jamon Green at corner, those two corners. DJ Turner took the job from Jamon Green like halfway through the season. So they've got those two guys. They've got Will Johnson, 5-star freshman out of Michigan at corner as well, like 6'3", elite corner prospect. Everybody in the nation wanted him, including Ohio State. So he could be somebody to watch there. Safeties, they return RJ Moten and Rod Moore started a couple of games, a handful of games last year as a true freshman. Rod Moore did. RJ Moten had a couple of starts. So they've got some experience. But the losses of Hill and Hawkins are significant, and also Gray as well. And as we always talk about with the Michigan defense, where is the depth? Is there depth enough to step up? I thought the depth was good enough last year to pick up and you got additional starters. Like you got starting from DJ Turner, who ended up being better than the season opening starter of Jamon Green, and that's really what you need to continue to see from Michigan, because I don't think Brad Hawkins should have been a 3-year starter. They should have been able to recruit better, and that's kind of what they've been able to do a little bit here in the secondary.
Brad Hawkins was always kind of if Brad Hawkins is starting for you, like he's okay, but if Brad Hawkins is a multi-year starter for you, that tells you kind of what your ceiling is, that you haven't been able to recruit over that guy, because he was a good, consistent player for them. He was never a terrible player. He just was never like an outstanding player. He was never someone who you were going to, I don't know where he's projected in the NFL draft, but I suspect he's going to be sitting and waiting a while to hear his name called. So you ultimately, you need to have the Dax Hill guys. Like Dax Hill is, if you want to play at the college football playoff level, the playing a competitive game in the college football playoff level, you need to have a lot more Dax Hills and probably a few fewer Brad Hawkins in your secondary. They just lost a Dax Hill, and then they lost Brad Hawkins, who was beating out all the guys who couldn't beat out Brad Hawkins. So that's a little bit of a concern to me. I know the secondary was such a tire fire 2 years ago, and it was so much better last year. I genuinely wonder how much of that was quarterbacks didn't have time to throw the ball downfield, because I never really bought into the secondary for Michigan last year, even though the numbers were good. And this is me saying I may have been wrong. That may have been a better secondary than I gave them credit for. I still feel like we don't really know, because when you have the pass rush that they had last year, if you have to cover for 2.5 seconds instead of 3.5 or 4, well, that makes you can be a substantially better corner if you only have to cover for 2.5 seconds, and then Aiden Hutchinson is eating your quarterback's soul. Like that makes a big difference. That's, we've talked about that we've previewed all 3 levels of the Michigan defense now. I have mentioned Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo at all 3 of those levels, because when that quarterback doesn't have time, when you're constantly getting guys behind the chains on sacks, like that changes everything about what the opposing offense can do. It really limits what the opposing offense can do. Now, without a replacement for those guys at that level, I think life's going to get a little more difficult for the defensive backs as well. I don't, this should not be 2020 bad, but I don't think it's going to be as good as it looked in 2021 either.
It's interesting that you say that, because I'm thinking back to watching DJ Turner, who I thought played pretty well last year as he came on, but a lot of my memories of him are just blowing up screens because Michigan's opponents had to throw the ball quickly, and they were easy reads because you saw it coming, and then you just attack it, and then you get there before any blocker, and you make a play, and you look good for it. And it's like, well, but that's not coverage. That's tackling. So let's see. We'll get a better idea of what the coverage at Michigan looks like this spring, this year, and I'm sure everything will look fine this spring, even though there'll be like not a lot of information coming out because Jim Harbaugh likes to keep a confined news source going on there. So, Tom, anything else from the secondaries of either Ohio State or Michigan?
No, just I think this is a really, really fascinating. This is maybe the most interesting, and I don't know, maybe I've said that about 3 different position groups, because it's like this is every year at spring. Like this is one of my favorite times of year, because it's like, man, there's so many there's new guys, new scheme this year, new position changes, transfers. I mean, it is just, there's so much new stuff that I can't wait to start learning about what this team is really going to look like. We've been talking about it since basically the clock hit 0 in the Rose Bowl. Now we get to finally start to see what this team is going to look like this coming year, because it seems like it should be pretty good.
Well said, Tom. The new phone books are indeed out, and I can't wait to look at it. So that will do it for this episode. I want to thank you all for tuning in. As always, if you'd like to give us a 5-star rating or review, that would be great. Don't forget to catch the rest of the shows here. You got Tom's Morning Scoop, Alex Gleitman Around the Oval, Gives in the Bank with Mark Givler and Bill Green, Kevin Noon's Big Me Kickoff. Check them all out, YouTube or on your podcast platform of choice. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.